welcome to Good Grief, the podcast dedicated to demystifying and destigmatizing grief with compassion and humor. I'm Nikki. I'm an end-of-life doula and a grief coach in Columbus, Ohio. And today I have another special guest episode. I had a super awesome, lovely, beautiful conversation with another kindred spirit. I just love when I meet people who enjoy talking about grief and death as much as I do. And I promise you guys, we're not depressing. You'll hear in this conversation. But I had a beautiful conversation with Hope Rieger of Grief to Hope. That's grief, the number 2, and hope. And I'll put her links and stuff. We'll get to that in the description. But before that, super fast, there is a content warning. We do talk about death, violent death, very briefly at the beginning of the episode. So feel free to skip ahead a little bit. But we do talk about that briefly, so you know. Okay, now real quick again before we dive in, I've got to do it. You know what's coming. Here it is. Did you know I have a Patreon? Yes, I do. You can find me at patreon.com/Nikki the Death Doula. And if you become a patron of mine, not only are you a super awesome, amazing human being that is supporting me and my work, you get bonus content. You get access to this podcast a whole week early. You get grief affirmations in your inbox. You get check-ins, all sorts of super cool stuff by me, from me. You also get free and or discounted access to my workshops, which I have one workshop online that is available for sale. You can find the link on my website and you can get access to that for free. Okay. All right. So you, again, can find that at patreon.com/Nikki the Death Doula. Enough of that. That's not why you're here. You are here to listen to me have this great conversation with Hope of Grief to Hope on what her organization is, what they do, and how they can help you. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Hope Rieger. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in this week. I'm very excited. I have another special guest with me, somebody I just recently connected with who reached out to me, Hope Rieger, like eager. And I'm super excited. I don't want to say anything else. I want to let Hope introduce herself and talk about her company and what she's doing and why we're here today. So Hope, go ahead and take it away.
All right. Thanks, Nikki. I am so thrilled to be here and part of your podcast. So thank you so much. I'm honored. Again, my name's Hope Rieger. I breathe in Ohio. I have 2 sons, Brian and Justin is forever 19. Brian's 34. Wow, he just turned 34. I have 3 beautiful granddaughters, and they are my hobbies. Like everybody asks me what my hobby is. It's 3 granddaughters that spend a lot of money and all of my time as well. But my husband and I have been together for over 10 years now. Recently we got married 6 years ago. Oh gosh, that's bad. And I recently retired from a major financial institution in November. And my story begins in November of 2016 when I lost my 19-year-old son to murder. It was the knock at the door, police standing out front. I went to the door that morning. It was 6:30 in the morning and they're beating on my door, right? And I remember opening the door thinking, what has that child done? Versus something couldn't be seriously wrong. I'm thinking he's 19 and they're trying to find me. They're trying to get a hold of me, or he's, in a place where he can't remember my cell number, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was literally handed a piece of paper. And that piece of paper, one of the officers said that they were trying to reach me, this person, name and number, and for me to give them a call as soon as I can. And I thought, again, what has this child done? Because surely if it was something horrific, these police officers would have told me, because that's how life works, right? That's what I've seen on TV.
Yeah, that's what I would expect too.
Right. And so I literally asked them if they knew what this was in regards to, and they simply said no. They had no idea. So I shut the door very, you know, just curious of what it's all about, but not thinking anything horrific. And I lived in a condo at the time, so I walked upstairs and I thought, who's going to answer the phone at 6:30 in the morning, right? But I
Mhm.
thought it's urgent. Maybe Justin's really got himself into a pickle, right? And the person on the other line answered Greene County Coroner.
Oh no.
And that is how I found out about my son.
Wow.
So literally, and I have to give much respect to this coroner because he was very apologetic of having to tell me over the phone, but he basically said, Hope, I'm so sorry to tell you this, but Justin got into an argument with with one of his roommates,
Okay.
and that turned physical. So they were arguing and then it turned physical. And one of the roommates pulled a gun and put it to my son's chest and shot and killed
Oh
him.
my God.
Now, Justin didn't have any guns of any kind at the time. It was something that literally was a simple argument that turned violent and deadly. And I'm on the other line thinking, you have the wrong number, you have the wrong person, you have the wrong. I mean, this is not really what happened. And I just literally said to him, "Where's Justin?" And he said, Hope, he's at the county morgue. They had to move him because of the investigation. You're not able to see him until you make arrangements with the funeral home. And all I kept on thinking was, as a mom, right? He's cold and alone
Yeah.
and in this dark place, and I can't go to him and fix it, right? Because as a mom, you think you can fix anything, and most of the time we can fix anything. But unfortunately, this was something I had no way of fixing. And I literally at the time had moved a couple hours away for my job from our hometown, but my oldest son still lived in that hometown. So the coroner agreed to meet with me over at my oldest son's house to sort of go over everything because I was in complete shock. I didn't know what to tell people. I didn't know what to do. It was just, and I talk about those first few days as sort of like candle wax melting.
Mhm.
Like everything sort of happened, but in a blur. Like it was just sort of like everything meshed together. And I was not prepared. And this is one of the things I do the way that I do, is I was not prepared for anything traumatic. I had lost, people in my life, but nothing like this.
Yeah.
I had no idea what to do, what to say, how to feel. And not that you know what to do or prepare yourself for any of this,
Mhm.
but on top of the grieving, I didn't know how things worked, right? Like I didn't know that I had to have $10,000 for a funeral home for they would even pick up my son. Like
Mhm.
I didn't know, and it's not like I didn't have insurance. I mean, I had insurance. Justin had insurance, ironically enough. I had savings, I had retirement, I had all those things, but I wasn't prepared for that. I wasn't prepared for them to say, "Hey, you have to give us all this money, right? Before we'll even let you see him."
Yeah.
So it was almost like I felt hostage to the situation.
Mhm.
Um, but in doing so, those 3 days, 4 days, 5 days of all funeral arranging, um, trying to tell people what had happened and all the questions. And I didn't even have any answers. Like I didn't have any answers to any of it. And I couldn't, everybody asking why. And
Yeah.
so in doing so, um, m- after the funeral and everything had sort of like, I call it like heartbeat monitor. Like, in the first few days, it's like up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, and then you have sort of some lags in between, and then it's up, down, up, down, down, down. But on top of the murder, he was arrested that night, completely admitted to what he had done. Um, but because of a technicality of where my son stood in the house, they allowed him to go free with self-defense. So because my son had him, his back was against the wall and my son was facing him, and the other person witnessed this, even though Justin didn't have a gun or knife or any kind of weapon, that he was able to claim self-defense
Oh my God.
and was never indicted. So then, this was months later, 3 or 4 months later, because I was always told, don't worry about it. He admitted to it. He's
Yeah.
going to pay for this, slam dunk case. It's, Justin didn't have any weapons, there's nothing to worry about. And I remember thinking, okay. And so when it went to the grand jury, because the grand jury decides if there's even going to be an indictment.
Mm-hmm.
So before even there's a trial. And of course, I didn't know any of that either. But the grand jury allowed the self-defense plea, which led to no indictment. So as a mother, you have somebody that I feel like I didn't protect my son as a mom. I didn't protect his life. I didn't do the mom's duty of protecting my son. And then now I couldn't even give him justice, right? I was mad as hell.
Well,
I was
yeah, I'm mad right
mad.
now.
I know. I was mad as hell. And I literally said to myself, I can't, I'll never be able to live this down. I can't. I'm so mad. I'm angry at God. I'm angry at the justice system. I'm angry at the county. I'm angry at, every single person that ever lived and my son was taken. How come yours, you're living, if you're a murderer or rapist or abuser, how come you're out here learning and you take living and you take my son? And then it all of a sudden hit me with all this anger
Yeah.
that literally I could go to my bed, stay there for the rest of my life and hate people, hate everything, hate life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or I can choose to pick myself up and to fight for Justin, fight for me, fight for anybody that's grieving out here, fight to honor my son every single day and live a way that means so much that it's even out of my touching area,
Mm-hmm.
out of my sharing. And so that's when I decided that I had to I put this, I say this saying all the time that he took Justin, but he wasn't going to take Hope. And so that's when I decided to create, I call it devastation to determination. I had to figure out what I needed to do. And so that's when the thought process started of what I could do to honor my son.
Yeah. Wow. Oh my gosh. I'm angry for you right now.
I
And
know.
I'm
Right,
quite
right.
sure all my listeners are going to be angry right along with you. Like oh my God, to not have that justice served. I'm sure is absolutely heartbreaking. But I mean, kudos to you for taking this and doing something good with it, first of all, right? And
Yes, yes,
moving forward, not necessarily moving on or moving away, but moving forward and using this for something, a little bit better than just
right.
being angry. Because yeah, like you said, any one of us could go through something like that and make the decision to just hate the world.
Yeah,
Um,
right.
I've had losses in my life where that was my initial reaction for the first like month or so. It was like I hated the world, I hated God, I hated everything because I was just like, how could this happen?
Right, right.
So it's nice and refreshing when you can turn that anger and that hate and turn it into something good. So tell us a little bit about your organization then, like what you
Yeah,
do.
absolutely. So, again, like I thought to myself, this has to have some kind of meaning, some kind of purpose for me and for honoring Justin and serving. And I needed to take all of this negative energy, all of this anger, and put it towards something positive, right? Because that was going to be how I honor my son, how he lived versus how he was taken. And that's why I want people to understand, like, I want people to know the Justin that I knew, not
Hmm.
the Justin that was murdered by someone who got angry. Because that
Right.
would have been the same thing that I would have did. If I was angry, then it would have ended the way that I lived,
Hmm.
right? And I
Right.
couldn't do that. I couldn't do that. And so literally, this happened in 2016. So I worked and worked and I did some blogging and I wrote, I started a book and I volunteered and I did pray a lot once I became a little more educated in religion, and I'm still learning. And one of the things that I heard was just be kind,
Hmm.
and I didn't know what that meant, but I heard it. And I thought to myself, what does that mean? Like, I'm nice, do I compliment everybody? What do I do? So I volunteered, right? I started
Yeah.
paying it forward. I even have a funny story about when I went to a coffee shop and I paid for somebody in front of me or somebody behind me, never had done that before. And then ironically, the cashier's name was Justin.
Oh,
So like all of these things, right, were like working. I'm like, okay. And I did say to God, I said, if you want me to pay for people's meals all the time, you're gonna have to be making me rich. But in all reality, like
yeah.
I thought this is the path that I need to take is to be kind to others, to serve others, to figure this out. And I didn't know what that meant until COVID hit.
Right.
And then when COVID hit in 2020, I realized the level that it put on grief.
Hmm.
And so what I saw was people being isolated, being alone in their grief, not being able to say goodbye, not allowed to have funerals, not allowed to process the grief the way that I was allowed to, the way that really was a closure for me, that
Hmm.
people were now in their homes alone, and we were counting deaths on TV. And I kept thinking, what if grandpa was, or my husband, or my son was 5,893 for the state of Ohio. I mean, I just thought it was such another difficult level on top
Yeah.
of grief. And I thought I got to do something. And so as we are on virtual Zoom,
Yeah.
I was on Zoom for work, and that's when I realized, oh my gosh, I can bring together people that are grieving from their living rooms, from their home,
Hmm.
from the comfort of their space, but not allow that isolation
Hmm.
of not knowing that they're all by themselves or that they have to go through this alone. And that's when I started Grief to Hope, which is basically a 7 week program. I put pen to paper and created the 7 weeks. And it's designed to allow a main topic of conversation
Hmm.
and then open up discussion from the comfort of your living room. And so we joined for 7 weeks straight. And I have people that have been with me. I started in 2020 that are still going through the 7 week program
Yeah.
because the amount of community that we've created is
Mhm.
just so amazing. And
Yeah.
it's an atmosphere that provides encouragement, compassion, hope, support. And it's all about how moving forward in your grief, not without it, but with it,
Hmm.
and what that all means to different people and their experiences. And we have people from a loss that occurred 30 years ago to a
Hmm.
loss that occurs 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
It's all variety. It's not just child loss, it's spouse loss, it's parent loss. And this community is now, luckily enough, is now a 501(c). It's a nonprofit organization. It doesn't cost anything to join. I've never charged anybody to join because I feel like I want to make sure that people have a place to go where they don't have to worry about dressing up, getting ready, going outside.
Mhm.
They can take it from their house with wine, coffee, in their pajamas
Mhm.
and be completely at home, like
Yeah.
a conversation.
Yeah. I And thank you for doing that. I feel like I actually attended a grief support group when during COVID. It was supposed to be in person like prior to, and then COVID
Right.
happened. So it was early on. And I actually kind of appreciated that because I feel safer in my own home than in a room I don't know around people I've never met to just bare my soul and talk about the things that are hurting me the most at that moment. But if I'm sitting here in my own comfy chair wearing my pajama pants with my cat on my lap, it's so much
Right.
easier for me to open up about these things. So I know I've had this conversation with people because I have a grief support group too, and we've debated back and forth. Do we want to keep it in person or do we want to go virtual so more people can attend? But
Hmm.
there are so many people that prefer that like human connection. So it's
Hmm.
kind of a toss up.
It is. And let me tell you, I think one of the things that I've learned with Grief to Hope is there's some people that want to be on camera, some people that don't want to be on camera. It allows that if you're having a hard moment at that time, you can flip yourself
Yep.
off camera.
Yep.
There's no judging of people like when you're in an in-person group. However, that human connection I think is strong, right?
Yeah.
And when I went through the grief group as well, those people is what brought me back, right? Those people being around that community and having that connection. So I think it's a win-win for both.
Mhm.
I think it's all what your comfort level is, but
Yeah.
I find that people that want to be around people but don't want to share yet
Hmm.
find the virtual group more relaxed atmosphere where they can shut their cameras off. They don't have to speak if they don't want to.
Yeah.
There's no pressure for any of that. And I think um one of the greatest things with having it virtual is it's global,
Right.
right? We have
Right.
people
Yeah.
from Australia that's joined, Canada. It's all over. So it's reaching a global atmosphere or environment that I think is amazing. So we can hear different types of grief. And what I mean by that is, how different cultures grieve, how different men and women grieve,
Mhm.
the difference between that, the difference between, when you grieve in the morning compared to when you grieve in the evening, the differences of all that. So it's been an amazing experience, but I think in-person grief groups are so helpful too.
Yes, absolutely. I know I personally benefit more from group grief support than individual, and I do individual coaching, so I work with people who prefer individual, and that's fine. We're all different, but there is, like you said, even the people that maybe not want to participate right away. Just being in an environment, and I've mentioned this on this podcast all the time, just being in a safe environment where you can listen to other people talk about things and you can hear that and say, somebody else felt this too. And it's so, as grief is so isolating. It
Mhm.
can make you feel like you're on an island all by yourself. And it's easy to get stuck up in your head and think all these terrible thoughts. And then when you finally get to hear somebody else say that they felt something that you have, like what a breakthrough for everybody. So, yeah.
Oh, you're absolutely right. One of the things that I struggled with was like, am I doing this grief thing wrong? Like, I didn't know what
Yeah.
to do. And I remember talking to the my counselor, and I was like, listen, am I doing this wrong because I'm not in bed 24/7?
Mhm.
I'm not curled up in a fetal
Yeah.
position and crying. Am I doing this wrong? Does this prove that I'm not that I wasn't a good mom?
Mhm.
I started doubting things in my head where if I laughed at something, I felt that I call it the grief guilt, where, you're not allowed to laugh because you lost your son. You're not allowed to enjoy life again because you lost your son. You're not allowed to do this and that. And I'm like, who put these rules in place? Isn't that
Yeah.
right? Who put the rules up? And we don't talk about grief enough because nobody wants to talk about it.
Yeah. I know. I know and that's why I have this podcast because nobody wants to talk about we talked about Tony who I had on the show too, who has his podcast like hence it's just straight up called Grief Let's Talk About It because you're
Yeah,
right, we don't. And like almost everybody I've spoken to has gone through what you went through with like I'm not doing this right. Why am I not sad all the time? Like because you're a human being. We're
right.
complex. We have complex feelings and spoiler alert, you don't have to be sad all the time. You can be happy while you're grieving. You can be joyful.
Absolutely. And not feel that grief guilt, because that grief guilt comes in all different kinds of shapes and forms. And I
Yes.
think one of the strongest things is that um, when you don't know what to expect when you're
Hmm.
grieving, and then you think automatically, you look at TV, social media, and you
Mhm.
see all these things, and you're like, I'm supposed to be grieving like that.
Yeah.
And I'm not, I'm grieving like this, so I must be doing it wrong.
Yep.
So then you have that failure, like you're failing in grief. And
Hmm.
that's what I try to tell you. There's no grades. Nobody gets it. Nobody gets a reward for it. Nobody gets points taken. Nobody gets
Yeah.
ground for grief. It's literally as unique as you are.
Yeah. We're not keeping tabs on anybody. We're not keeping score. So
Right.
everybody's going to do it a little bit different. And
Right.
I remember after my brother passed away, having a conversation with my mom that we each, at one point or another, had a feeling of relief because, had a lot of health conditions. He was very, very sick for a long time. And we weren't waiting for this anymore. Because when somebody's dying or when there's a serious illness involved, you know it's coming and you're just waiting for it and you don't know
Mhm.
when it's coming. So when there's a sense of relief, and we both felt so bad about that.
Right.
Like, how
Right.
dare we be relieved he's gone? And I wasn't really, neither one of us were relieved he was dead. We were just
Right.
relieved at the situation. And there's nothing wrong with that.
No. And that's the thing. I think there's so many people that have expectations, and this is one of, and I spell out the word grief in my thing. And so one of the letters is E for expectations. And we talk about the expectations of what we have as
Hmm.
grievers and what people expect of us. Like people expected us to, like, one of the things is to go back to normal after a month.
Yeah.
30 days, Hope, you got plenty of time to grieve. Let's get this show on the road. And I'm like, I'm not ready. I'm not ready to be back in normal mode. I'm not ready to be back in that work environment. I dealt with serious grief fog or brain fog or whatever it was. Never even heard of grief fog till somebody
Oh,
said,
yeah.
yeah, somebody literally said, I said, I cannot think. Like I can't react to questions. When somebody would ask me something, it would take me minutes to like comprehend what they were asking
Yeah.
me. And I remember being at work saying, I cannot think straight. When you ask me a question, it takes me a while to process it. And I don't know why. And the person said, you have grief fog. You
Hmm.
have grief, fog. And I'm like, what is that? Why hasn't nobody told me about it? Right? I'm
Yeah.
like, and so many things you learn. And
Yeah, there's no handbook. Nobody gives you a handbook when somebody dies to say, here you go, here's what's going to happen. I mean, there are handbooks out there, but
correct.
there's no
Right.
there's no
Right.
universal one, and there's nobody standing waiting, to hand it to you when you experience a loss. So you kind of have to
Right.
find it on your own.
And even with handbooks and books, because I have a book too, and my book is basically because when people came to me and said, I'm not ready for a group setting, but I want to know your story, Hope. And I want to know the program, and I want to know how you did what you do, and what, how you made the decisions that you made. And I say to them all the time that my book is open and transparent. It's
Mhm.
raw, it's ugly, it's
Mhm.
not for the people that are expecting butterflies and sunshine.
Yeah.
Literally what I went through.
Hmm.
And there are things in there that are raw and
Good.
open and gritty and ugly. And I wish I would have had that book before I grieved.
Hmm.
And that's what I tell people all the time when we do our work that we do. It's sad that our work is done in the midst of it or after it happens.
Yeah.
And if we could do, I call it pre-grief. I'd love to do a pre-grief like seminar or
Yeah.
something like this is
Yeah.
going to happen to you, right?
Yeah.
9 times out of 10, this is going to happen.
Mhm.
And these are some things that you can expect. And this is how things, and
Yeah.
most of us don't want to hear it,
Yeah.
don't want to know.
And I'm in a unique situation with my job as a death doula that I do have that opportunity for
You are
the,
so lucky.
I know for the loved ones and the family members to let them know, okay, here's what to expect after your loved one's gone. I'm not going to say this is how you're going to feel, but these are things you might feel. And these are things that might happen. and this is normal, and like it's all normal, but I have such a great opportunity for that. Not everybody gets that. But even so, when there's an expected death, it doesn't mean you're ready.
Correct.
You
But
know?
there needs to be more of more people like you, Nikki, that are out in the community that's sharing what's expected, because this is what I tell people all the time. It's terrible that in the midst of your worst pain, you have to make life-changing
Yep.
decisions, right?
Mhm.
And not that I compare death to a broken arm, but if you break your arm and somebody comes up to you and says, I need you to to buy this house or not buy this house, I mean, you're going to be making a life-changing
Yeah.
decision in the worst pain of your life.
Yeah.
And so with grief, and not that breaking your arm has anywhere close to grief, but it's putting the perspective in, if you're in your horrific pain,
Mhm.
but then everyone's coming at you like you need to get pictures, songs,
Yeah.
clothes,
Mhm.
everything that you want your loved one to be remembered by at that exact moment in
Yeah.
that horrific pain.
Yeah.
And so people like you that can go and say, let's do this beforehand,
Mhm.
miracles.
Yeah.
People don't understand the value
Mhm.
until they go through it.
Well, and
Unfortunately.
I'm constantly preaching to anybody that will sit still and listen to me, like
Yeah,
about getting your advance directives in order for the same thing. But I mean, why not write your obituary? Write it now, because none of us are guaranteed tomorrow. As you very, very well know, having your
yeah,
son taken so suddenly, like any one of us I could get hit by a bus tomorrow, it's completely nothing I've done. It's not my fault. I'm gone now. And
right.
the more that can be ready ahead of time, oh my God, the better. Because yeah, and this is I will not I get on soapboxes a lot on my podcast. I will not get on soapbox about the funeral industry, but there are a lot of shady funeral directors out there that will take advantage of the grieving to make a buck. And I'm not gonna say they all do that.
Right,
There are
right.
some very nice ones out there that will not do that. But I mean, what a time to try to decide, like, do I really need this $10,000 casket? No.
Gosh,
But then you
yes.
have that person in front of you that's like, don't you think this is what they would want? I'm like,
But you are, oh my gosh. I love that, because that's exactly, you just gave me chills, because that's what I went through with Dustin.
oh
Because this was
no.
literally, now I think the funeral home that I went to was amazing. And it was my third funeral home that I had to go through. They were the first funeral home that said, Hope, we're going to go get your son. We'll figure out the money later, which I thought was amazing.
Right.
But this was the place where, and we did, in lieu of flowers, we did toys, because it was November. So we had everybody bring toys, and they took care of it and took it to an orphanage. And it was the most amazing thing. And I know Justin was so proud of that.
Oh.
But one of the things that I caught myself doing was, this was my last gift to Justin. So I was going to go elaborate, and I was going to buy this, and I was going to buy that. And it
Mhm.
didn't matter money. And at the end of the day, I tell everybody, he would have been fine with a small metal box than what
Right.
I gave him, right?
Right.
Because he knew that wasn't the love that I
Mhm.
had for him.
Mhm.
And that's where we start to put our money into, like,
Mhm.
he had to have emblems on his casket, and he had to have, I had a mural on his vault that people signed. And I just, things that at the end of the day, if I would have had somebody sitting next to me, or somebody saying to you, Hope, "Hmm, is that really what you want to spend your money on? Would you rather do this with it? Would you rather do that?" And literally, just like you said, wasn't that the funeral home, and I know that there's funeral homes out there that they're a business, and that's how they run it.
Sure.
Instead of a um there needs to be more empathy in funeral homes, but I get it. It's a business they're running. They're
Right.
there to make money. And I
Right.
tell people all the time, just like banks are there to make money. Unfortunately, that's the way they work, right? They're
Yeah.
not there to hold your money in a shoebox in the safe deposit box.
Right.
But the thing about it is like, understand what I need and what I can give is a big deal in the funeral, right? Like understanding um where this is coming from, because I felt like this was a gift to my son instead of like this is just a place that I'm putting him to be buried in, but his soul will survive elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking in that, I'm thinking I need to be like, as much as I possibly can.
Yeah.
And it puts you in a really hard place,
Yeah.
really hard place.
And not, and I won't crap on anybody who wants all that elaborate stuff. If that's what they really
Right.
want, that's fine.
Right.
And like in your case, you said you had that vault where people could sign it. Like, what a beautiful little tribute, right? And there are times where maybe that might help with closure a little bit too. So I would never poop on anybody for making that decision by any stretch. But you're right, just to have somebody to sit with you, hold your hand, and make sure you're making an informed decision. Doesn't have to be right or
Right.
wrong, but just let's make sure you understand the impact of all these decisions, which we don't have, you know?
Right. And I think that one of the things, and you're right, absolutely. If you want to do $100 million funeral, and that's your way of doing things, that's amazing. And if you're able to do it, that's even more amazing. That's great. But I think it's having the choice of what is important
Yeah.
and what taking what you have and providing a great service,
Yeah.
right? But also knowing what's important,
Yeah.
because making those decisions are you're not in the right frame of mind. But I'm just
Yeah.
leaving that out there. Like you are
Yeah.
not right
No.
in the right frame of mind making
Mm,
any decisions right after
no.
that. And a lot of times, this is one of the biggest things that I say is that you automatically feel rushed to do a funeral. I
Yeah.
don't know
Oh, yeah.
why that is. I don't know who put the time limit on a funeral. I mean, I'm sure there's certain time limits, but take your time. If you're
Yeah.
not ready 2, 3 days,
Hmm.
you can ask questions. You can
Yeah.
take time.
Yeah.
You don't have to rush to get this started. And that was one of the things because Justin's was right before Thanksgiving. And
Hmm.
so everybody's like, you got to get it done before Thanksgiving. You can't go into the
Yeah.
holiday, blah, blah, blah. And so I think that was one of the strongest things that I really, really suffered with.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're right. Unless like there's no time limit. Unless the funeral home is closing in 3 days forever. There
Right.
find another funeral home, but
Right. And even
yeah.
then, yeah, you can figure something
They
out.
do have a sense, and there are considerations with if you want to do a viewing and things like that. But that's I could go on all day about that. So,
Yeah.
but so I wanted to ask you, what do you feel like you have, and this is a big question that could probably take an hour to answer, but what do you feel like you've learned about grief in this process? What's the biggest lesson you feel like you have learned that you could pass on to others?
Absolutely patience. I call it grief patience.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's number one because patience with yourself and learning how to understand your body, your mind, how things work, how things aren't like TV and the movies,
Right.
how things aren't like social media, but also the patience of knowing that at any point in time for the rest of your life, you could have a grief meltdown or a trigger or because what I was trying to accomplish with grief was trying to get to that finish line,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so everybody I know talks about this as well. It's like there's a finish line to grief, right? Like if I do this journaling, if I do this counseling, if I do this, I will get to that finish line and grief
Yep.
will be poof gone. And
Yep.
I will never have to worry about it again, or never have to feel this pain again. And it never, ever finishes.
Nope.
Now, that's where the patience comes in. The patience comes in where you have to be patient with yourself and how you focus your day. And that's where Grief to Hope is sort of all about is like in the morning when you get up, you have to make decisions on what you plan on spending your day with, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes that day may be so overwhelming with grief that it's called timeout day. Like I'm in bed, I'm really emotional today. Something triggered, something happened, whatever that may be, an anniversary, a holiday, or something. But then you've got to focus, and this is where the patience comes in. You've got to focus and be patient with yourself to understand that this has to be limited to a day or an afternoon or an evening, and tomorrow is going to have to be a restart.
Yeah.
And that's where we have to learn that patience of finding that focus of tomorrow. I've got to get up. If I'm granted tomorrow, I've got to get up, get motivated, find a focus, find an inspiration. And I don't care what that is. If it's big, small, write a book, go outside, take a shower. I don't care what that is once you find that focus for the next day, the amount of strength that you build from accomplishing that focus is where you build upon the next day.
Mhm.
And so that's what I try to instill with Grief to Hope is finding that focus, but understanding the patience of grief and that there are days that it could knock you to your core.
Yep.
And I'm 7 years in, and there's days it knocks me to my core. But I have to allow myself patience to get through it, patience to understand it, and find that focus.
Awesome. Yeah, you sound just like me.
Hey, yay.
I know. I'm always telling people like you're gonna have that day where you can't function, and that's just gonna have to be how that day is, and that's okay. You get another chance tomorrow. You
Yeah.
know, let it help you. But yeah, and you're not gonna get over your grief. Grief never goes away. There is no, I never use the term finish line. I like that. There's no finish line. You don't get a trophy that says,
Right. I
I
kept
grieved.
waiting.
Yay.
Like I kept thinking, when I cross this finish line, I'll never feel this pain again. And then you just have to have that patience to know it may or may not happen. You
Yeah.
know, you may not ever have that day again, but you may. And
Mhm.
I think it's all that unknowing things you just have to be patient with.
Yeah. All right. Well, so I have a tradition at the end of my episodes where I pull a card from the death deck, and I'm going to let you answer it, and then I'll answer it. And
Awesome.
I'm shuffling it. I try
Okay.
to pull them at random, but every now and then I pull a really bad card, and I'm like, nope, we're not doing that. Okay, well, this one's actually really nice. So,
Okay.
which of the following top regrets of the dying most strongly resonates with you? A, I wish I had focused more on enjoying life and being happy. B, I wish I'd taken more risks and lived the life I wanted to live. Or C, I wish I'd spent less time working and more time with loved ones.
Oh, gosh, I have to go with B
Yeah.
because one of the things that I've learned with Justin's death is that if you don't start living your dreams and hoping your hopes, they're going to go with you to the grave.
Yep.
And I heard this expression like the most expensive place is the graveyard because that's where all dreams and inventions are held. I've heard that somewhere, I don't know where,
Yeah.
but that is what I dwell on every single day is living the life that I want to live because that is most important.
Yay. I like that. I would agree with you. Let me see. Yeah, honest. I mean, a little bit of A too for me. Focused on more on enjoying life and being happy. Because I was a very serious child. I was a very serious teen. I had my emo years, and I kind of wish I would have just
Oh,
let that crap go and just. I'm a goofy person by nature, so I'm trying to. My word for 2024 is joyful. I'm trying to be joyful again. So,
I
but
love
I mean, taking risk is a big one, like you said. You know, if we don't do it now, when? So. Awesome.
that.
All right, Hope. Well, I'm going to let you talk briefly about Grief to Hope, where people can find you and your book as well. So,
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me. It's been amazing. Grief to Hope can be found. I have a website, grief, the number two, hopesupport.com. I'm on Facebook under Hope Rieger, Grief to Hope, Instagram, Grief to Hope 2020, LinkedIn, Hope Rieger, Grief to Hope is on both of those. My book you can get through Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and it's called Grief to Hope. It's sort of duplicate all around. My Grief to Hope sessions right now are running. Um, I'm not sure when this will be broadcast, but I do it 4 times a year, and you can find the schedule on my website, grief, the number two, hopesupport.com. You can also contact me through that website, and I am really pretty good about getting back to you immediately.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And I will put links to all that stuff in the description for the podcast as well. So you can go down there and just click away.
Awesome.
Oh, Hope, it was so lovely speaking with you today. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your impactful story and your organization, Grief to Hope, with us.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Another huge shout out and thank you to Hope Rieger for being on my show and sharing her raw and beautiful story about the loss of her son and her starting this super dynamic group support system and program with her nonprofit Grief to Hope. So I put links in the description for the website, her socials. Please follow her. Please go check it out. I am just so excited that I got to chat with her, and I look forward to speaking with her more in the future and probably have her back on again at some point. So, all right, before we go, as usual, you can find me and my cat in the background screaming for his dinner. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, all at Nikki the Death Doula. You can also find me on patreon.com/Nikki the Death Doula. I already talked about that at the beginning, so I won't talk about it more, except please support me. If you liked this show, please do me a huge favor, rate and review my podcast. That's a simple thing you can do. It takes barely a minute. If you do 5 stars, it'll take you 2 seconds. If you write a little review, that'll be even better. And that should only take you maybe a minute. And just talk about how awesome I am. But that helps more people find me. And the more people that find me, the more people I can help in their journey through grief. And that's all I care about in this world. And I care about you. Because remember, as always, your grief is yours, your feelings are valid, and grief doesn't always have to suck.